No one wakes up in the morning expecting to change the course of history. Most wars are imagined as the product of grand strategies, powerful leaders, and carefully calculated decisions. But sometimes history turns not on empires, but on accidents, on hesitation, on a wrong turn down the wrong street at the wrong moment. This is the story of a young man who did not set out to start a world war. He did not command an army. He did not rule a nation. He did not even believe he would survive the day. Yet his actions, small, human, and deeply flawed, ignited a chain reaction that would consume millions of lives, collapse empires, and redraw the map of the world forever. This is the story of the man who accidentally started a war. In the early 20th century, Europe was a continent under pressure. On the surface, it glittered with confidence. Factories roared. Cities expanded. Railways stitched nations together. Kings, emperors, and generals spoke proudly of progress and civilization. But beneath that polished exterior, the foundations were cracking. Empires were aging. Borders were fragile. Nationalism burned quietly, like a fuse waiting to be lit. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, vast, multi-ethnic, and deeply unstable, was struggling to hold together dozens of peoples who no longer wanted to be ruled from Vienna. Among them were Slavic populations who dreamed of independence, unity, and freedom from imperial control. One of those people was a thin, sickly teenager named Gavrilo Princip. Princip was not born into power. He was born into poverty. A peasant's son from a remote village in Bosnia, he grew up hungry, underfed, and angry at a world that seemed stacked against him. He was small in stature, but intense in spirit. Books became his refuge. Ideas became his weapon. By the time he was a teenager, Princip had absorbed the radical nationalism spreading through the Balkans. To him and many like him, Austria-Hungary was not a protector, it was an occupier. And the dream of a unified South Slavic nation was worth any sacrifice. But here is the crucial truth. Gavrilo Princip was not a master planner. He was not a brilliant strategist. He was not even particularly competent. He was a desperate young man caught in a historical storm far larger than himself. In the summer of 1914, the Austro-Hungarian heir to the throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, decided to visit Sarajevo. It was meant to be a display of authority, a show of unity, a reminder that the empire was still in control. But the date chosen for the visit was dangerously symbolic. June 28th, a day sacred to Serbian nationalism. To many Slavs, it felt less like diplomacy and more like provocation. As the Archduke's motorcade moved through Sarajevo, several young conspirators waited along the route. They were poorly trained, poorly armed, and deeply nervous. Each carried a bomb or a pistol, and the weight of history they did not fully understand. The first attempt failed. A bomb was thrown. It bounced off the Archduke's car and exploded behind it, injuring bystanders instead. Chaos followed. The motorcade sped away. The moment was gone. The plan had failed, and Gavrilo Princip believed it was over. Disoriented, shaken, and convinced that destiny had slipped through his fingers, Princip wandered away from the crowd. He stopped near a small cafe. Hungry, defeated, certain that history would forget him. Then, by pure chance, everything changed. The Archduke's driver made a wrong turn. Trying to adjust the route, the car slowed, then stopped directly in front of where Princip stood. No guards intervened. No warning was given. For a brief, impossible moment, the most powerful man in the empire sat just a few feet away from a teenage revolutionary holding a pistol. Princip did not plan this moment. He did not foresee it. He reacted. 2 shots rang out. Within minutes, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife were dead. The assassin was immediately arrested. He would later insist he never intended to start a war. He wanted liberation, justice, meaning what followed was something no one, not Princip, not the generals, not the emperors, could control. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia. Ultimatums were issued. Deadlines passed. Alliances activated like falling dominoes. Russia mobilized. Germany declared war. France prepared for invasion. Britain entered the conflict. In a matter of weeks, Europe was at war. In a matter of months, the world was... Trenches carved scars across the continent. Machine guns turned human bodies into statistics. Poison gas drifted across no man's land. An entire generation was consumed by mud, wire, and artillery fire. And at the center of it all was a single, accidental moment born from confusion, chance, and a wrong turn. Gavrilo Princip would never see the war he unleashed reach its end. Too young to be executed, he was sentenced to prison. There, in a cold cell, weakened by disease and malnutrition, he slowly died as millions fought and perished in his shadow. History would debate his legacy endlessly. Was he a terrorist? A freedom fighter? A pawn of larger forces? But one thing is undeniable. The war was not started by a master plan. It was not ignited by a carefully calculated decision. It was triggered by a fragile human moment when fear, ideology, and chance collided. The First World War destroyed 4 empires. It reshaped borders. It planted the seeds for an even deadlier conflict just decades later. And it all began because one young man stood in the wrong place, at the wrong time, and pulled a trigger he did not fully understand. History often teaches us that wars are inevitable, that violence is unavoidable. But stories like this reveal something far more unsettling. Sometimes, the fate of millions rests on accidents, on misunderstandings, on ordinary people making irreversible choices in extraordinary moments. The man who accidentally started a war was not a monster. He was not a mastermind. He was human, and that may be the most frightening lesson of all.